advantage of an opportunity and pushing for that opportunity to be realized.
Thank you, CD. We have more than 8 ISPs in the Gambia, which we believe is good because it's going to promote competition. On the other way around, we also notice GSM companies are equally giving internet as the way the ISPs are doing. There is a problem in the ecosystem. I will give you a policy question. Where do you think something has gone wrong in terms of our policies to the extent the GSM companies that should stick to voice are now competing the ISPs in data? In fact, to the extent of not only providing internet on SIM cards, but also providing outdoors for customers in their homes to access internet. Where do you think the government get it wrong?
There's a conversions happening in the industry. Data, everything now is IP based, right? Whether it's voice or regular data consumption, it's all IP based. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I think that there will, over the long term, government will not have a choice but to actually allow ISPs to also do voice. And that is actually what is prevalent in the rest of the world, because you are not, think about it. How many times, WhatsApp or your phone app, which one do you use the most now, right? You likely spend more time on WhatsApp mm-hmm. and doing either voice calls or WhatsApp audio messages than you do spend on conventional voice calls. Mm. So you find that that market is going to decline over time, right? Mm. And it's one of the problems with Gamtel, because Gamtel built a business model on voice calls and international gateway, and I think all of you have heard that quite a bit. But then they woke up and one of the reasons the former president invested so much money in controlling the internet is because he wanted to block WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. The reason he wanted to block WhatsApp, and you saw this during the Jane Commission, mm-hmm. right, was because mm-hmm. he was making personally a lot of money from international call termination, right? Mm-hmm. But once they lifted the blocks, voice revenue dropped, mm-hmm. right? So ultimately, I don't think that there is a policy issue in terms of allowing open access or GSMs and ISPs to be able to connect people. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to the ability to provide efficiency. What I think is happening is that the policy is still skewed towards protecting GSMs, because when you actually break down the conversation with government, they will tell you, they are big revenue, they pay a lot of tax, mm-hmm. so we need to protect them. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to the question. We are in a very heavily taxed economy. Almost 100% of government revenue is based on tax. And so you find that as a consequence of that, right, all government policy initiatives are based on maximizing that tax revenue, right? And ultimately, that creates a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when we the root cause of the root problem here is the issue of tax. Because government believes that the GSM operators are giving it most tax revenue, they want to somehow protect them, yeah. right? Yeah. Because ISP don't pay as much in terms of licenses, mm-hmm. because they don't have as big of a revenue base as the GSM operators. But ultimately, what should have actually happened, similar to the rest of the world, is that you should have one license. Your license should allow you to do voice mm-hmm. and data, yeah. right? Now it's about you now getting the investment towards being able to make the right, to be able to now provide a better quality service, right? So in other words, the race should be one based on competence mm-hmm. and your ability to deliver a better product, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. It should not be one that's based on government intervention to be able to protect one over the other, not in order to provide better quality service to the Gambian people, but rather to be able to ensure that they're able to maintain, maximize tax revenue, to be able to maintain the government apparatus. And I think that's really what's skewing where the policy problem is.
As a service provider said, what is happening now, it's essentially going to going to affect the small ISPs, essentially that rely more on co-locations. And if the GSM companies are getting into providing internet to homes using outdoor CPEs, essentially they have more base stations from Carton to Koina. They can provide internet access to any household. So essentially, that's going to minimize the capacity. That is going to minimize the expansion capacity of the smaller ISPs that rely on co-locations. Where do you think the other ISP stands that rely more on co-locations to provide access?
Okay, so I think I'll let my friend from consumer protection come in on this issue. But I think I don't think that that is going to have a significant impact. Like, okay, we don't see, at least at INET, we are not seeing that issue. I mean, our company has focused on being able to provide quality service, quality and reliable service. And over the medium to long term, that actually generates long-term dividend, in that the perception becomes that they have a better product and we should go. In fact, we do see from time to time that somebody would actually abandon even Gamtel fiber and subscribe with us. So in the medium to long term, we don't see that as an issue. However, there is a problem in the horizon, which is that there are actually 15 registered ISPs, not 7. There are 15. Now, out of the 15, only 7 or 8 are actually operating. But also, a lot of the ones operating are operating at a very small scale. Now, I remember once I was there was a Pura, a month ago, there was a Pura consultancy looking at market dominance and competition. And I asked a very important question to the consultant. I said, look, at what point does issuance of new licenses stop being a positive and start being a negative? Meaning that when I go to set up a GSM or I go to set up an ISP, you have to be able to show multiple things. One, you have to be able to show that you have the required capital to actually roll out infrastructure. You have to be able to provide a business plan, and you have to be able to provide a rollout plan showing how you're going to roll out your base station. In the absence of this, you should not be issued a license. But clearly something has happened, because Pura has issued 15 licenses, but only has 7 active operators. So there is a gap there in terms of Pura's due diligence on the licensees that is issuing. And now this creates a problem, because when I go to raise capital, the capital markets will tell me, here, your market is chaotic. You only have a population of 2 million, but you have 15 ISPs and 6 operators. It's too risky. I cannot give you capital. So you find that existing operators that are operating now have challenges, a new set of challenges, because from the outside, there's an overly congested market. But the reality of the matter is that not all of these are operating, and out of those that are operating, some are operating at such a small scale, right, that their impact is not felt in the market. So I think consumer protection has to really come in and ask questions, which is, how do I protect the consumer in such an environment? And sometimes you actually have to restrict new entrants in the market, right, in order to allow existing entrants to provide better service. But also, are you actually working with the regulator to put the consumer interest first, or is government putting its need for money first, right? And in the telecom sector, we walk a very fine line. Like, you will sometimes come to the operator and say, I want better service, I want better this. But the reality of the matter is that the regulatory framework and some of the things you've already highlighted are being controlled or manipulated behind the scenes by government, because there's also that other flip side that you don't see, which is tax revenue. So maybe the consumer protection can help.
Thank you. We are coming to Babukar. Babukar has a lot to say. Babukar, looking at all these situations, a lot of things are happening as far as consumers or the end users are concerned. First, I would like to ask you, looking at the situations that are happening in the market, what is the stance of the GCCPC as far as the status quo is concerned?
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Um, Firstly, I think we need to understand that the Gambia Competition and Consumer Protection has two main mandates. That is the competition mandate, which has already been introduced easily for me by my friend, Sidi. We also have the consumer protection mandate. So if you talk about looking at the current status quo, with our mandate, we have two mandates in this status quo. Is it the status quo of government dominance, or is it the status quo of consumer rights violation? Then I'll be able to answer adequately on what you want to know. On the competition issues, we all know of which I'm the director of competition at the commission. The Gambia operates a free market policy, and with the free market policy, the Competition Act is passed to make sure that the Competition Commission policed that free market economy. That is, as he rightly said, market forces. I think we have some economists here. Market forces determine prices within the market, not the visible hand of government trying to drive issues. With that, what the Commission has done is to make sure that blatant government interventions are stopped in a sense that our rule as per the Competition Act, if you have access to the Competition Act, you can check section 15I, is to advise government on issues that affect competition in this country. One intervention we made, as Sido rightly said, Gamtel is 100% government owned, and with all the hypothesis that government took loan to help Gamtel, sometime around 2019, or thereabout, if I get it right, government did introduce a directive that all MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies should source their internet from Gamtel. What the commission did was to issue an advice to indicate that this is anti-competitive, because Gamtel has to compete. We don't use government power to give that to Gamtel. If as Competition Commission we feel that Gamtel is competitive enough, is efficient, it's our choice to go for it. If we find INSIS or other ISPs too, it should be our choice to go for it, and this would force them to bring the quality of service we are looking for. That becomes it. In terms of consumer rights violations, or in terms of consumer concerns, one of the main consumer concerns is on the cost. I stand to be corrected, and thank God I have seen you here. What I do know is, I've not come across any study on the actual cost of data, and when I don't mean price, please. What it will cost them to produce, to serve us the internet we need, market-wide. I've not seen it. So, and countrywide also, looking at different regions, because you don't focus, the cost only on in the Greater Banjul area. When you go to different regions, it will give you different competition. So what the commission is intended doing now is to conduct a market study in relation to the cost and other competition and consumer protection issues in this sector. In fact, it should have been up and running by now, but what stopped it is one of the consultancies that CEDU quoted, that Pura is correctly conducting, because the way we conduct market studies at the commission is we do it with stakeholders. These are sector regulators and the private sector. So what we intended doing was to do it with the Digital Economy Ministry, Pura itself, Ministry of Finance, and then Central Bank and Ministry of Communication. This will give us, a detailed report on what the cost is and what are the drivers of this cost, and also to be able to answer the questions correctly to say whether the cost is fair. What stopped it, as I indicated, we found that Pura was running a consultancy. Now we're trying to see whether these two consultants, what you want to do and what they're doing will not be duplication of effort. That is why we pause and we are trying to check, their, how is it called, the TOR of the consultancy as it rolls out. But on the Gamtel issue, if you look at the way the market is, as Sido has rightly put it, there is an embargo on running the fiber. And running the fiber, it means Gamtel is the only one that can run the fiber. But there is also another problem, which the Commission always highlight. The other problem is Gamtel does not only have a monopoly over the fiber, but the private ISPs have to buy the wholesale from Gamtel and also compete with Gamtel at the retail level. So, for the Commission, this vertical integration is disturbing. I think that's one reason why we even running this study, to make sure that proper policy directives are there. For the monopoly, you don't ask a competition authority whether you are in support of a monopoly. In fact, competition authorities are meant to dismantle monopolies, and we believe that the monopoly of the fiber should be as soon as possible, if not even yesterday, be dismantled, so that the market could operate. We have to understand one thing as a country, whether government or private citizenry. We cannot have it both. You cannot strangle an economy and expect the economy to grow. If I fondly say this, it is not the business of government to be in business. But if government chooses to be in business, it has to play by the rule books. What makes it difficult for the sector regulators is when you have to regulate the private sector or private providers and an SOE. Because in this country, sometimes, coming from competition background, I always say this, that sometimes we think it is the birthright of SOEs to be protected. What I do know, which might not be correct opinion to many, is government rules in terms of investment is to intervene into sectors where the private sector does not have the confidence to go in. Now, this is done in phases. When government comes in, what government does is, it is now trying to give that confidence to the private sector. And as the private sector is seeing the profit coming up, it could be in another form where government will do PPP to accompany the private sector. And with time, government will leave and set up a strong regulator. The resources invested here will now be invested in another area that will support private sector growth. So in short, what is the stance of the Commission in all this? The stance of the Commission is when it comes to monopoly, you could hardly, I cannot say you cannot, but you could hardly have any gain with monopolies, most especially when it becomes state-owned enterprises, because we all know when it comes to efficiency, the efficiency rate at SOE level in this country is very low compared to the private sector. So where there is enough private participation, I think government could assign strong regulators and allow the private sector to compete. This is our
Mr. Sise, one very important challenge that most consumers complain in the Gambia, which you made mention and CD made mention in his statement, that is with regard to price. And essentially, we keep asking this question multiple times, several times. And I witnessed so many events where if you put this question to Pura, why is it that price in terms of data or even voice is not regulated, and Pura will sit back and say, we don't regulate price, we don't determine price for the service providers. And for us as consumers, we feel that's not fair, because everyone is pulling out a lot of money in order to enjoy mobile data. What is the position of the GCCPC in this?
Again, competition and price control. They don't work. Coming from competition point of view, Um, in fact, I think for those who have been following the media, you know that I'm a strong advocate against price control. What we advocate for is prices to be competitive. Because when you control price, it has two disadvantages. The small operators, because you have to understand what we call economy of scale. The bigger operators, because they have a bigger clientele, they can be able to sustain it at an average. But the MSMEs that are coming might not be able to fight that. So what you are saying is, anybody who cannot operate at this price, leave the market. So it's a barrier to entry. And you are now strengthening those big players. And you will get to a point, the monopoly we are now talking about will be in the hands of the private player. So what we should be interested in is, what are the drivers of these prices? Why is it that the cost of data on voice in this country is relatively expensive compared to our neighboring countries? This is what we look into. Because sometimes, and let me quickly put this, whether it's ICT or other service and products in the market, anytime you say you call for price control, you are alleging only one thing. That is, the current price increment is as a result of greed by players, nothing else. But how about if the price movement is as a result of the current tariff increment by NAWEC? How about if it is as a result of taxes? How about if it's as a result of rentals? How about if it's as a result of importation? Who solves that? This is why I said, as I do know, for me, I've not seen a comprehensive study. So to call for price control, price regulation, when there is competition, he made mention of it. He said when they came in 2016 or 2017, if I got it right, you could see the prices going down. Why? Because those in the market, they felt competition coming from elsewhere. Our role as a competition commission, once we do this price, the cost assessment in any of these markets, and we see that there is a huge profit in the hands of the players, the next question we ask ourselves is, why is it that we don't have entrance in this market to force the prices down? For instance, let me give you this simple example. For those we are all from Konys, yeah? From streets. We know when there is an ebe seller on the street and everybody is queuing to buy the ebe, what do you see the next 2-3 days? Another one. Do you understand? That is competition. So if we see, and we don't operate anything different from this at the commission. When we see Sidu, I'm not saying that's what he's doing, sorry, please. But if we see him making a lot of profit as the cost structure we analyze, and we saw nobody coming in, we go in to dismantle the barriers. So that you, he said it, who have that capital to invest, you can come in and invest and compete him. He came as a young man and as an infant enterprise. And he competed against elderly people in terms of age, but also very strong enterprises and the training there. So for us, when it comes to price control, to regulate prices, we are not a good advocate for it, because we have to allow the market forces to determine, that is the demand and supply, to determine the prices in the market.
But Babakar, people can always say this again and say, you made mention of you are working on to have conduct an assessment to better understand the prices that the service providers are procuring this equipment. Honestly, I don't know how this assessment is going to be done, but the question can be, if you are to rely on the service providers to get the actual price of the equipments and the technologies that they roll out, do you think you will get the actual price to be provided to you by the service provider? I'll come to CD after your intervention on that as well.
I will be a fool, and I should be sacked the following day if I should rely only on the on the service provider to give me the cost. Then I don't have your interest at heart. As the Competition Commission, which is the GCPC, is not a private entity; it's a government entity. One beautiful thing about government is you have a lot of networks and you have a lot of powers. And if you are to do such things like this, one of the things you do is benchmarking. We have done this in different sectors of this economy. This is not the first assessment we want to do. But what we want to ascertain is whether the cost is what is driving the prices or is something else. Why are we interested in this? Sometimes the prices might even be driven by anti-competitive conduct. For instance, ISPs might choose to say we will not compete. We agree among ourselves to fix the prices, which is highly anti-competitive, which attracts fines when it comes to the Competition Act. And sometimes you might even see prices going down, and consumers are clapping when the Commission is saying no. And I know most of the consumers here will be like, what's wrong with the Commission? Because what we need to understand is, I know when Mr. Bensouda comes, since he's the one feeling the pinch as a private player, he will tell more. There are a lot of things that drive prices. But unless you understand it, you might be punching the wrong blow, and what you will do will be a disservice to this sector. For instance, under 1 minute, if, for instance, we see ISPs, the cost of internet going down to $50, we'll all celebrate, right? If you ask me as a commission staff, I'll be concerned. It could be a predatory pricing. It could be a pricing that is set out there to send a competitor out. And once the competitor is out, they will jack the price back and recoup all that gain. So this is why you need to understand the trend. If you don't understand the trend and you just, consumers are complaining and you want to just jump to say stop it, you might be hurting the wrong person. That's my response.
Yeah, Babukar, okay, yes, CD.
The reason I want to just comment quickly, and just 30 seconds and I'll go back out, I'll allow the conversation to continue, is, before the study, I know Babukar said that they're going to do a study, but I'm going to help him summarize the study today, very quickly, all right? All right? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to help him with this study very quickly, all right? Now, remember I said there are 15 registered ISPs. Only 7 are in operation. All of them were given a license in December of 2021, right? Now, why haven't they gone into operation, right? We should ask ourselves that question, right? Second thing, right? If you actually look at poorer data on households, relatively only about 20% of Gambian households, roughly I estimate, actually it was 10% at the last study that I looked at. The 2022 study is not out, but I estimate it will be about 15 to 20% of Gambian households have internet broadband of some kind. That means that 80% don't have it, right? And I am sure that the primary reason is affordability. Now, why do you really think, right, that I, as a CEO of INET, don't want to take advantage of that, right? Because I know that the primary issue is cost. If we bring down the cost, the likelihood that these people will come on board, right, is very high, right? But, yet I don't want to do that. I can't do that, right? And if the 15 operators say there are 7 operators not operating, and not a single one wants to take advantage of this market, why? Out of the 7 operators that exist, not a single one wants to take advantage of this market, right? You see, that should answer a lot of questions, right? And I repeat, right? Right now, the cheapest internet subscription you can get right? I think it's with us, and it's 2,300 a month for 4 Mbps. That's the cheapest internet package we have, and I think it's now the most popular one we have, right? That translates to roughly about what? $30 a month, right? It's never going to get cheaper than that. What will likely happen is that the amount of bandwidth that you're going to get is going to increase over time, right? As we deploy more and more base stations, right? We can now have sufficient capacity that instead of providing 4 Mbps, we can now give you 5, 6, maybe even 10 Mbps for the same price. But there are costs, and I'm just going to break this cost down systematically. I mean, believe it or not, it's in my head for the most part, but I'll break this down for you, right? The first one, right, is the capital cost. You have to build the base station, and it's a sunk cost. Right? You make it cheaper, you're going to get problems. Why? You have to put in and build that base station. You have to get a return, because if you don't, base station, if it breaks down, you can't fix it. Right? So you have to have a return on the base station. Now, you need to have manpower to maintain the base station. Now, you have to buy fuel, right? To be able to fuel the cars and pay the salaries of people to maintain the base station. You have to train them. If you get under-trained people at the base station, they're going to cause more problems that they're going to solve. Then there's NAWEC. NAWEC just randomly decided that they're going to go, for you at the house, it's a 40% increase. For me, it's a 50%. INET is a 50% increase. Right? For commercial, they've increased it more than they have done for individuals. Right? That cost comes back. Right? Then now there's, believe it or not, the cost of roads. One of our biggest cost centers is vehicle repair. Right? We are constantly repairing vehicles because these vehicles are constantly moving around to people's houses and they're getting damaged. What are the key things we have to repair? Shaft, bull joints, mud getting into the turbocharger. It's weird things that you don't have to repair anywhere else in the world. But in Gambia, you're constantly making those repairs to your vehicles, right? And the cost continues. You now have international transit charges, right? Et cetera, et cetera. These are all costs that go into providing you internet connectivity. Then, as a point of clarification, in 2018, as part of the ACE share, as part of access to ACE, government also, PURA, the regulator, also put price structures for access to Gamtel fiber. Now, we have to make a distinction. There are two fiber networks at Gamtel. There's what is called the NBN, that's the fiber to the home. It's what Gamtel sells to individuals. Then there's what is called the Echo One. Maybe you've not heard of it, but this is now the ring, the fiber that is laid in Gambia. This is not used by individuals. This is used by the operators to connect our base stations, right? And sometimes you'll hear especially when they were doing the road construction, when they were laying down the culverts on Bertil Harding Highway, they were cutting cables, and operators' networks were going down on a daily basis, right? Literally, they would cut it in the morning, they repair it, they cut it the following morning, before the next day, right? But that fibering is what the operators use to connect our base stations. That is the only thing today that we operators get from Gamtel. At ACE, we buy our own capacity. We don't use Gamtel at all. It is only that Echo One infrastructure that we have to buy from Gamtel, right? But there are problems. To date, we cannot sign an SLA with Gamtel. So meaning that if my cable goes down, I have to go and beg somebody and Gamtel to fix it. But I have no service contract, right? So what happens? I have to put up a radio network to support the fiber network as a backup. That is cost, additional capital cost, right? So you find that there's a lot of cost that goes into providing connectivity. But ultimately, if you compare anywhere to the world, right, $35 to $50 to $100 a month is where internet connectivity is. Recently, I heard that government was working with SpaceX, saying, oh, SpaceX is going to come to Gambia and internet prices will become cheaper. But the cheapest tariff SpaceX has is $100 a month. That's 5,000. That's what, 6,400 per month. Huh? I mean, that's more than some people's salary in Gambia. It's not going to happen. The reality of the matter is, right, that, I mean, where we are right now, we are at that point where incomes in Gambia are also very low. But the broader conversation, internet connectivity, is also economics, right? More and more people over the past 10 years are falling into the poverty, below the poverty index. And this is not because salaries are coming down, but because there's pressure on the dalasi. And the cost of the dalasi is depreciating. So if you were earning $5,000 per month, that was $100 a month. Now it's about $80 a month, right? But still, you're consuming everything that is being paid for in dollars, right? So in people's minds, that, okay, the internet prices is expensive. It's really not, right? If you compare it to anywhere in the world, feel free, go and check. At least I can speak for broadband internet service. The prices is equivalent to many places in the world, right? In fact, if you travel to Sierra Leone here, and you use the internet, you come home, you will never talk about internet again, right? You will not, right? I mean, I promise you that, right? You find that Gambia is actually doing quite well in terms of quality of service and cost of internet. But what we are not doing well, right, is creating meaningful employment, right, for people to be able to afford basic utilities, right? So as a consequence of that, we are now, the mind is naturally switching and saying, Lune kadafashia. And then our natural inclination is to blame the private sector, right? But we forget, right, that we import everything, right? We export nothing, right? And most of our jobs are skimming the poverty line simply because we are not creating industry, right? But instead, more and more, we are looking to tax the few places. But what happens when you don't export, when you don't produce? You tax the onions coming into the country, you tax the rice coming into the country, you tax the basics. So similarly, where does government tax, right? Internet, electricity, food imports. Those are what we tax. But those are the basics needed to survive. You understand? And I think that is where the conversation has to shift to. So I'm kind of moving a little bit here, but it's important that we understand that we really have to ask the right conversations, which is we need to really have conversations around, okay, employment opportunities, employment initiatives, right? Creating better employment, right, for our youth today. And the only way you can do that is by allowing the private sector to be bigger than government. So far as government is the bigger than private sector, which is what you have in Gambia, we are going to be sitting here having this conversation because for that government to operate, it is going to tax the private sector. It's kind of like you have a small monkey carrying a big gorilla and you're wondering when the monkey is about to die. And the gorilla is like, hey, go faster, right? But sorry, I mean, I can only take you so far before I have to drop you, right? And when I drop you, we all suffer, right? So, I mean, sorry, now I'm laughing because I can't get this image out of my head. But I think you get the point here, right? Okay.
Bugar.
Before you ask the question, I'm happy here this time around I'm a consumer. I'm speaking as I'm happy he said it is he can speak of the broadband. Mm-hmm. When we say internet is expensive in the Gambia, me and my fellow young people, we mean our mobile phones, not the connection we have in our homes. In fact, that's the biggest luxury you can have, to say I have broadband in my house. Going to Senegal, I bought $200. I'm not saying safer. I mean $200. That's what I bought at Andalai. I was in Senegal for 3 days. These $200 served me. I went back to Senegal. It served me. Luckily enough, I was on tour with the minister, going around the country. Anywhere I can have Orange network in the Gambia, it was still serving me. I mean, forget about the conversion. Those economists who are here don't convert anything. I mean, I use $200. I dare not put $200 on my phone. Do it. Get into YouTube and you see what will happen.
Okay. No, but it's a valid point and point noted, right? Uh, but two things that you have to also consider, right, is that in Senegal, Orange knows that when you go home, right, you likely have access to broadband, right? So if they want to sell, right, they have to bring the prices within reason. Now, we actually notice a trend a lot with customers. Whenever a customer connects their home to internet, what they often tell us when we ask them is that our mobile usage goes down, because when I am at work, I have internet. When I go home, so in between, I manage because it's too expensive, right? But now the problem is, though, is that the broadband market is still trying to catch up. But then also the broadband market is facing limitations because the average Gambian can afford to buy $500 of credit and manage it for the month. But to have that fixed broadband on a monthly basis is difficult, right? I mean, and you find that in a lot of households that we serve, what actually happens is that it's actually a shared Wi-Fi. Yeah. Now, you'll have a customer call you and complain, and you look at their traffic graph, and you see that they're using the entire in fact, it's 5 meg actually that we give you. They're using the entire 5 meg. And you say, but then you see how many people are connected to this. And you actually check, and you see that there's like 20 people connected to one access point, right? And then everyone's complaining bitterly that it's too slow, right? And you say, but you need to increase. And you can see the look on the face completely change, right? What are you talking about? This is what we can afford on a monthly basis, right? So that is a problem, right? Is that affordability of if home broadband penetration can go up by an additional 40%. I am pretty certain that naturally mobile broadband services costs are going to come down. The reason they're going to come down is because it's demand and supply. Because people now have an alternative in their homes. And where do you spend the most amount of time? Work home, right? That's where you spend, at least for me, I spend 80% of my time. The rest of the time I'm in transit. I'm either buying something or doing something for which I don't need internet. I might just need the occasional messages here and there, but I don't need it. So you find that, for me, I think that as more and more people get connected at home, right, naturally, the operators will be faced with no choice but for prices to come down. But that also said is that currently there are only 2 players in that market space, right? Even though there are 5 licensed GSM operators, there are only 2 active players in that market. Now, unless there is a third, right, it's going to be difficult again for prices to come down. But that also said, there are also challenges in the horizon. Like, for example, the issue of spectrum management, spectrum cost, the issue of levies. Believe it or not, in our sector, for ISPs, there's education levy. There's another levy. Then there's taxes. There's VAT, right? Every time you buy credit, telcos pay VAT, operators pay VAT. There's a corporate tax, right? There's a lot of, and then there's municipal taxes for the base stations and the offices that you have in the support branches. No, there's no. But there's a lot of taxes as well that are added. So if you actually look at it, you find that about 30% of what you're paying is actually going towards taxes as well. So there are conversations that need to be had about, and maybe the law that needs to be looked at is what is the maximum government can tax on basic services. And basic services are already defined in our human rights statutes, right? Which is, and I think internet recently has been added as one, right? So you find that for basic human rights, what is the maximum our government can tax, right? To allow prices to be reasonable, right? But so far as government sees that, okay, these are this is the only place where the economy is generating. If you go to any bank, they will tell you, right? There are the main businesses in Gambia that are doing well are what? NAWEC, obviously. Utility. Well, I mean, they should be, right? But then it's food import, the importers. They're the only ones generating revenue. And then is what? Telecom, communication. Those are the only 3 businesses in Gambia, right? And when we come back now to the ICT ecosystem, and I've been there for a long time, all the software space, all the other spaces are having battery of challenges in order to gain hold in the Gambia and to export, except in ICT, these few spaces. So when government comes and says ICT is our biggest economic driver? Yes, because the part of the ICT that is doing well is what? Telecom, the human right? And that is the problem. If I go to the US, the biggest ICT companies are not AT&T. They're not, right? They are the Amazons and the Google. They have nothing to do with telecom, right? So these are some of the conversations I think that we need to be having to better understand this. If you go to Senegal, right, government is not involved. The regulator is only the regulator that is involved in the sector, and the regulator just sets policy and leaves market forces to prevail. But in Gambia, you have a Gambian-owned enterprise, both in GSM and in internet service providers that are heavily participating in the sector, and taxes are very skewed towards ICT.
I think that's what Sid said is very, very important, and I hope the GCCPC is really going to look into these issues when engaging Pura. I wanted to ask a question with regard to Spectrum, but I will open the floor for people to ask, because Babkar has another panel to attend from here. So can we have the mic around? I can see a lot of hands. I can see a lot of. Yeah, you can. Yes, ladies first, please.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Ndai Job, and this question goes to Mr. Sidi. As an ISP provider since 2016, you talked about affordability. But how do you approach data privacy and security for users, and what measures do you take to protect personal information and online activities for your users? Thank you.
Okay. That's a good question, and I think that it's really two parts, right?
Yeah.
So the first part is the privacy of our users, right? And then I think the second part is how do we protect people online? Now, I think the easier question, believe it or not, is probably the privacy. And I think for that, it's actually a culture, right? The company has to have a culture of putting the customer first and protecting that customer first. So, I mean, at INET, we do a lot of things from firewalling to also training and sensitizing staff on how they use user data and making sure that when they leave the office, they leave the data behind. Recently, we deployed systems that help us to record conversations between our customers and the company, to be able to make sure that we are providing the best service possible, but also that there are no breaches in terms of communication, in terms of information, meaning that you don't call and I give you information about somebody else. So all our customer care lines now are actually being recorded and monitored to make sure that we are providing quality. But also in terms of data, we are very careful in terms of protecting and firewalling that data and making sure that you only use it in a controlled environment. So staff are also only given access to enough information based on what they to do their job, and that's it. So a lot of times we try to do that, but it's always an ongoing process in terms of communicating and helping also staff understand the importance. In Gambia, we often have a very bad culture, which is the Baikosibir culture. It's very nonchalant attitude towards a lot of things, and we don't always understand the impact. And when somebody does have a problem, the attitude is like, kidafa soft or funny. So we still have that culture where people need to understand and appreciate, right, in the workplace, the importance. Just because happen to hamnit doesn't mean that you shouldn't protect their information. And because hamnga somebody and you are in a workplace where you happen to have access to information, you cannot go and talk to another friend, internet. Those are attitudinal and maturity issues, right? On a constant basis, you are having to manage and deal with. Now, moving to protecting customers, this is complicated, and there's really two types of protection. I think, and an earlier panel mentioned it. There's one protection, which is making sure that my child doesn't access content that they're not supposed to, right? And there, I agree with the earlier panelists that you, the parent, has to take a responsibility. Like, for example, last year, I got my son a phone. Actually, his uncles got him a phone, but I was against it. But when they got it, I had to do something. So Apple allows me to link his phone to mine. I can control what apps he can use, what he can access. He complains every day, and he comes and tries to bribe me to open up more content for him. But I'm like, look, this is the age restriction, this is the age restriction. Recently at his school, there was an incident with iPhones and the school, with WhatsApp, and the school banned. But he didn't have WhatsApp on his phone, right? The mom came to me and said, but why not? I said, look, with WhatsApp, I can't control what he will get access to, right? And I don't think that he's mature enough for me to allow that. And to be honest, frankly, from my view, I don't think that any child under 14 should have access to WhatsApp for any reason, right? No matter the justification, right? The parent can say, I just want my child to be able to communicate. It's irresponsible, because the likelihood that they will get access to information that they shouldn't is high, and you will have no control. So that's one aspect, which is that participation of the parent to ensure that the child doesn't get access to bad content. But there's another aspect to protection, which is where the operator can step in, which is being able to protect, right, your communication to the internet, and make sure that there is no middleman between the two. Meaning that you try to access BBC website or your banking website, somebody presents you with a fake banking website, and then you access that instead of the actual website you're supposed to access. Or somebody using your IP address to masquerade as you in order to do something online. These are, in some of those areas, the systems of the operator can help to ensure. And there are basic things that can be done. Like, for example, yesterday I was at a meeting at the ministry, and I said that not every operator in Gambia actually has a locally registered public IP pool, right? That should not be the case. If you are a licensed operator in Gambia, you should not be using IP addresses of another country in Senegal, right? Or in Mauritius. You should be using a locally registered IP address in the Gambia. That way, if there is a fraud case, right, which the operator has nothing, but then the police comes and says, this IP was involved in a fraud, I should be in a position to say, this customer won't use IPB at this time, and majority information, so that the case can be taken. But in the event that I can't provide that basic information, I'm not doing you a service, right? Which is that to fulfill my obligation to make sure that you are protected online. But then now, sort of, there's another dimension, which is that, and this is where really, and I think just now speaking to what was said earlier, we need to put, in the earlier panel, is that we need to have a lively discussion about content and access to content, and making sure that